So I'm gonna let Dana kick us off. Shh. So what we often do is we say what scares and excites you about X. In this case, your approach to whatever you're doing philanthropically or relating to impact or for the community, obviously next gens, if you're part of multi-gen. What scares and excites you as a way of part introduction, who you are, and answer that question if you go. What scares and excites you in
Okay,
this
great.
area?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dana Frank, and thank you, Mark. Thank you, Erica. There she is, for having us. So I run a third-generation family apartment rental business started by my parents 70 years ago. And I chronicle it in this book, Get Up and Get On It, Black Entrepreneurs' Lessons on Creating Legacy and Wealth. And as we were talking about philanthropy and what it means to us individually, not to bring back the button push, but my passion comes in changing the narrative and helping individuals understand that they can change the narrative despite what their birth circumstances dictated. In my family, my grandmother was a maid and my grandfather was a carpenter, and they gave birth to my mother that's been my business partner for the past lifetime. I mean, we've worked together since I was born, and again, I run a third-generation family business. I have an uncle that's a federal judge, one of the most notorious federal judges in our state that's handled some of our most notorious cases, the Green River murder, Barefoot Bandit, you name it. And I have an aunt that was the first African-American flight attendant that Alaska Airlines hired and retired. And most famously was my late uncle Quincy Jones, the music producer. And so watching my family and the struggles that they've had to overcome, I say they didn't just break barriers, they shattered them. And so for me, that's what my philanthropy passion is about, is helping other individuals understand that no matter where your starting level is, you can change the narrative. In my family, we are all separate on what our philanthropy interests entail. My husband, he never had children. It's my second marriage. He was raised watching animals get slaughtered in the middle of Pennsylvania, so his charitable endeavors are with animals. My son, who's 31, is my business partner. He's interested in higher education and affordable housing. And mine is working with children. I spend a lot of time with kids in foster care, Mary's Place that has a program called No Child Sleeps Outside. And I think the biggest key for philanthropy is just understanding that we all need to do something. You cannot receive with a closed fist. And so just keep your eyes open and be aware. And your time is your most valuable asset that you can help change the narrative of someone else's life and how powerful that can be.
Good job. Well, that's my sister, so I'm very proud of her. My name is Patty Savoy, and I moved from Eastern Washington in 1996 to Seattle and worked at a company called Vulcan. And so wherever the guy is that worked in the space portion of Paul Allen, I started when there were 63 employees. I started in operations, and by the time I left in 2003, we had thousands of employees. So it was a really entrepreneurial time, and they really required, I loved the Allen family, required us to do things for others. And so after I left Vulcan, I went to Africa for the first time, and I met a man by the name of Tony Fitzjohn, who was mentored by George Adamson. So if you know the story Born Free, that was the main character. So I went to Africa, saw all these ecosystems that were really cool, and there might have been cool lions and leopards and all kinds of things. And this man kind of put his arm around me, and he mentored me in philanthropic work in ecosystems and saving, at the time, species habitat, and now it's turned to planet, right? So the Woodland Park Zoo, which is it's an accredited zoo. They found out that I was going to Africa a couple times a year and asked me if I wanted to be on their board, and several, what am I saying? committees, sorry. So I was on 3 committees and the board, and then, so that's what I've been doing for the last 2005, 20? Oh, well. So in other words, I raise a lot of money. That's what I do. So I just ended a task force for 112 million, and I was hired one of 15 to end it, to kind of wrap it up with a bow for 8 million. So that's.
Thank you. Hello. Hi, I'm Paul Lessany. I'm here today from Opportunity International. We're an international NGO. We've been around for over 50 years. We focus on eradicating poverty. So when I was thinking about what might keep me up or bother me, it's the 700 million people today that make less than $2 a day, which is just enough to be able to get enough calories to eat in a day. To what Keith talked about earlier, which is a focus on 2 more billion people. So I'm hoping that we can bring that number down versus have more people in extreme poverty over the next years. What excites me, I'm responsible for our digital innovation program. So I started, I was at Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, so a lot of the tech companies around here. And at the end of my 30-year career, I decided to focus in on how I could apply some of what I learned to products and innovation at that organization. I'm sorry I didn't get to hear all of the conversation because I'm applying, using generative AI now in the case of handing farmers in Malawi just a few weeks ago an AI application that lets them ask questions, take pictures in local language, and learn about what their crops and issues are. Without that technology, it could take them weeks to get an answer to a question like that, and it's just a game changer. We focus on agriculture as a way to make sure that people have enough initial income, then education so they can get their kids into school, and then finally micro-entrepreneurship, because I think that one thing I learned in the last conversation is that the people that I've met in all of those countries, they're not single-trick people. Those people are just amazing, and they will do everything from planting seeds in the morning to going out and trying to sell something in a market that they have to walk to for a couple hours to get there in the afternoon. And so we're giving them tools. Lastly, there was the question about education. We've tested prototypes of generative AI tools for micro-entrepreneurs that act as a coach or a mentor to a person to really bring them, for instance, in India, to become what they call a banking correspondent so that they can go off into a rural community and use the information that they've learned in order to kind of earn an income for their family. So that's what I'm here for. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Anna O'Donnell, and I'm the Chief Philanthropy Officer at Friends of Waterfront Park. And so I actually represent someone who is a fundraiser. No one decides, I think, as a kid, like, I want to be a fundraiser when I grow up. I think it's something that people typically fall into, and it's basically meshing skills with something that you're passionate about and then bringing other folks into that. So it's an honor to do this work, and I'm very local. I walked the mile over here from my office on Pier 56, and I think an interesting opportunity that I see here in Seattle is this is a really philanthropic place. You look at Bill Gates and Microsoft and companies like Vulcan, who early on just built philanthropy and built employee giving in, and it's makes doing this work in a town like this much easier. I do see, I think there's a big gap as we pass along to the next generation, and model, what does civic leadership look like? We're finishing up a $170 million campaign to finish Waterfront Park. And our org will be around in perpetuity, like the Central Park Conservancy to Central Park, to make sure that it's cared for and welcoming and safe to everyone. But I do think how we pass down that, Dana, what you're talking about, like that set a good example. And not every kid wants to learn from their parents necessarily, right? I think finding mentors and resources as folks with resources. Just what does giving look like? How do we model that and encourage that? And there's just a lot of opportunity to give in a different way that's less restrictive. I think you look at Mackenzie Scott and what she's doing. The whole north end of Waterfront Park here is being privately funded by Melinda French Gates, Mackenzie Scott, and then Barry Diller through his foundation. There's just a lot of change that can happen when philanthropists jump in, and you can be a lot more nimble than government. Waterfront Park is a public-private partnership, and that takes a lot more effort, but there's so many gaps that need to be filled. I think, especially right now, a lot of government funding is changing, and nonprofits, a lot of nonprofits, big, small, medium, there's just a lot changing right now, and so there's a real opportunity to step in, but I think, I personally see a need for some mentorship and I think guidance for some of these younger philanthropists trying to figure out their place, and there are concerns about putting your name out there and then everyone's calling you and asking for money. So again, there's not necessarily a playbook, so it feels like something that collectively we can work on.
I'm Carl Bradley, investor, philanthropist, serial entrepreneur at times, which led to becoming a philanthropist. My family foundation, the Bradley Family Foundation, invests in the education of our youth and those with special needs. Focus on high school students, grades 8 through 12. We've developed which won't go into everything that led up to where we are today, because that would be probably a summit. 10 years ago, we started our Alpha program, pilot program, which has become CASE, which is Communications, Arts, Sciences, and Entrepreneurship, and focused on the applied arts, robotics, filmmaking, recording arts and sciences, coding, of course, and then, of course, AI is in everything. So we fully integrated that into these activities. So we really are poised with what we're doing in this education of our youth point, and it is a strong point on a global scale. We've been partnering with a international private boarding school on Vancouver Island, Alpha pilot program, 10 years, so we're kind of 2.0, beta now for the rest of time. And our families are from around the world, up to 36 nations. These youngsters are very much engaged with our CASE program. It's been, sometimes people will say it's been a life ring in their education. You've got the regular stuff that you do and all the sports and all the academics that go along with a school like this, but our focus is on the applied arts side of the equation. We want to skill them up, introduce them, help them network with opportunities to build career pathways before they graduate from high school. And our foundation is responsible for doing that directly with industry. We have a relationship or relationships with plenty of those businesses. So applied arts tours that happen throughout the year. These kids go on it. CASE funds these tours. And our foundation does a $100,000 with this particular school. We do a $100,000 matching grant program, which generates north of $300,000 a year, and we spend around maybe $250K a year on the development, and then we're moving into a capital campaign to build a idea and innovation center, which will be about a $40 million program. Building, and it'll be open to community, of course. That does plug into the global footprint of the work we do. So, and other than that particular organization on Vancouver Island, all the other organizations that we work with are here local. Lake Washington Institute of Technology in Kirkland is now plugging our CASE program into their new design center, and so we're just expanding now. That's what we're up to.
Thank you. That kills my question on Next Gen. Next question I'd like to ask, equity, inclusion, and power. How do you ensure philanthropy does not reinforce the power imbalance?
Thanks, Erica. Again, I think that equity inclusion is so important right now. When you look at the statistics, I teach an acronym I call REAL. And the R is research, the E is expand your network, The A is amplify injustice, and the L is leverage. And I think that the importance of amplifying injustice is so key. I mean, people look at me, and I was raised putting pickets on banks to amplify the injustice of redlining. All the properties that my parents purchased were in districts that the banks would not allow funding. And people tell me all the time, oh, that was back in the 70s and the 80s. It's so unfortunate that you had to picket. But we didn't have social media. We didn't have Instagram and TikToks and other ways to express that that the younger generation does now. But I think a closed mouth, again, does not get fed. And it's so important that when we look at statistics, 74% of white Americans own a home compared to 44% of black Americans. We have to do something to bridge that gap to make it fair for everybody. And so speaking up and expressing that and making sure that the younger demographics understand that. In our state last year, a program was introduced called the Covenant Homeownership Act. And it's an answer to the 1968 Fair Housing Administration that any person of color that has roots in Seattle since 1968 can get down payment assistance and 0% interest on loans. And so this is creating home ownership opportunities, and that again is a part of philanthropy, educating the next generation to understand that these programs exist so that they can have the property, get the power, and create a future.
I pass. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. That's a really interesting question right now. It's been difficult. I won't get political, but just as a human being, it's been difficult to watch what's happening. So I don't know what the answer is to that. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm open to thinking about it and talking to others about it. I think my background is I was adopted from North Africa when I was 2 days old, and lived with Caucasian parents. I think I'm considered Caucasian, but I don't. I'm black like she is. No, I'm kidding. So I mean, I think that when you are judged by the color of your skin, or you're a woman, and to see what's happening with healthcare for women and people just being taken off the streets, it's that's what I'm scared about.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm scared about.
You don't want to travel internationally?
No,
right?
yeah, I mean, I can't. I was supposed to go to Morocco. I'm not going to go. So, anyway.
Equity and inclusion. I think that something that comes to mind, I think I just read a statistic yesterday, about 2 billion people in the world still don't have access to consistent internet. People that I work with don't have access to electricity. Someone talked about the different phases of time, where you start with agrarian and move through those things. The people I work with still in the agrarian phase in many cases. So there's a big distribution between the tools that we build with this AI and things like that in developed countries right now, and the idea of how can we distribute it in places like that. We can't do it by ourselves. We rely on governments. We rely on other institutions to try to build those things. And I think that the important thing that we can do, though, is highlight what can happen if we do bring those technologies into those places. So I guess that's the way I'd think about it.
This may be controversial, but maybe it's not. I just think fundraising is, philanthropy in general is kind of I don't want to say a broken system, but it is, it's straight out of the white supremacy playbook. If we look at the imbalance of wealth, and then the power dynamic, right, of fundraising. You've got a donor telling you to do something, and nonprofits are answering to the folks that support them. That's how they're set up, right? You bring the money in, and then you do the work that serves whatever community you serve. I don't think we can break the whole system down to its base at this point. I don't think it's where we are. I think there's a lot of great work being done to just sort of face it head on and look at models that are perhaps less donor-centric. And I'm not saying don't acknowledge and thank your donors up and down. Obviously, that is what nonprofits can't do their work without donor support. But I think it's centering the community you serve and really focusing on the impact you want to have and bringing the donor into that without putting their name in lights. I think, again, Seattle's a great example of that. I think a lot of donors in Seattle will show up to an event wearing a fleece vest, and it's not about them. And you look at the community-centric fundraising movement, which has started in Seattle and is slowly picking up steam. But I think it's incremental change, I think, does make a difference towards greater equity and diversity. So, but it's a process. Most fundraisers are middle-aged white women that look like me. So, I mean, it's where we are. I mean, the field. This is a whole separate summit, I think.
Well, you're right about the Caucasian part there. As a grant maker, that is primarily the profile of our executive director, and mostly in the advancement department. I think the DEI thing is, I think it's valid. I think it's a tough topic to talk about. My answer to that usually is, shouldn't we all be thinking that way anyway? Why do we have to wave the flag? In the context of our foundation's work as a grant maker, we're a collaborator. We just don't write a check and say, hey, good luck. We are, it's sort of like we don't direct our giving. With a program like CASE, it's sort of self-governing. It kind of does that because it adapts to the environment, the pedagogy, the school, the community, wherever it may be. So from our position as a foundation, a grant maker, we've finally come to a point after about 12, 13, 14 years of doing this, being able to say now we know what we're doing. But that's our context, right? But the beautiful thing about it is the DEI part of the equation at a school like Shawnigan Lake School on Vancouver Island, which is a gift, our petri dish, is we have all of that going on, that diversification from around the world. That global footprint is right there. The melting pot, the culture, everything that happens is teaching us how to all play together. I mean, how can you make the world a better place if you don't contribute to it? So that's what we're trying to do, and do the best we can with our partners that help us do that, and CASE is our platform.
Thank you. Jack, did you have any questions? I mean, anybody have any questions out there? Anybody? No? Keep going. Okay.
For education, we have like the Middle East, like Abu Dhabi or Dubai, for example. They teach the children already from the beginning AI. What do you think about it?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Okay. Hold. If you just hold your. I couldn't quite hear most of what you said there. So just
So,
eat the mic.
so what do you think about it? UAE, like Dubai, they teach the children from the first day in the school about AI. What do you think about it? We speak about education.
Well, I think intrinsically, because of our CASE program, we've been there. We've been talking about machine learning and AI since December 2015. So it's embedded in our thinking and our design thinking in the development of these applied arts programs that all interplay with each other: broadcast journalism, recording arts and sciences, robotics. It all comes down to really exercising the most important muscle we have, which is our brain, and our activities are all fine motor-based skills. We have lots of gross motor skill activities: rugby, rowing, hockey. I mean, it's everything. You know, this is a completely self-contained system. Planet Shawnigan is what I call it. That sort of inside that, with its global footprint, answers all these questions that, or pretty much any question you may ask about whether it's DEI or AI or anything in particular, Because these kids come back to us and they drive it, right? So I don't know if that answered your question, but it's everywhere.
I just wanted to follow up on one thing about the next gen, is I think it's so important that we as the adults often shield our offspring from the very struggles that built us. And I've always raised my kids with being on the front lines, because that's how I was raised. When we were children and we would go on cross-country trips, my father would make sure if we were in Chicago, we stopped at the Robert Taylor projects to see how poverty was up close and personal. And my kids have been raised, you know, going down to search and rescue at Union Gospel Mission. And I just think it's important that we always have to be present and not lose sight of the fact that there are so many suffering around us. And I think if we all just do a little bit, I mean, I'm that person that if they say, you know, give an extra $1, that $1 is going to help. And so I think that's just what we all should be mindful for. I've been in philanthropy for so long. Like I said, I've worked for Mary's Place and Treehouse. 25 years ago, I went to a Treehouse for foster kid luncheon, and I heard the story about this 14-year-old boy. The first day of school, he had to wear his foster sister's hot pink stirrup pants because that was all he had. And that moved me to get involved with foster kids. And I just think if we all just not only put our dollars there, but our time and our resources, that the world would just be a much better place.
And thank you so much, all of you, for all your work. And Dana, thank you for the extra books. I too work with girls that. Yeah. And we celebrate girls that turn 18 out of the foster care system and help them into adulthood. And Dana's donated some books to that cause for tomorrow's event. So, anyway, last question: strategy and impact. Can you give an example of philanthropy investment that exceeded your expectations, or one that didn't? Or both.
You need time to think. Let's see. Something that comes to mind is we were ending a campaign to talk about the last 3,200 tigers in the wild. A lot of people have problems with zoos, and I will tell you that all the trips to Africa, when the zoo came to me and asked me to be on the board, I was like, yeah, no. You know, I'm born free. But I will tell you that it is scientifically proven that when a human being has an interaction with an animal, that they're more likely to act on their behalf. So that's what really brought me there. So we're ending this tiger campaign, and I invited 10 of my girlfriends to do a big party for 1,000 people, and I went to every heavy hitter in this city. You might not know a lot of them, but Kemper Freeman, the Seahawks, Nordstrom, Vulcan, and I begged, essentially. And we raised one of the top amounts of money that evening. But I used creativity, and I find sometimes in like 501c3s, they want to do it kind of the same way that they've always done it. But we were able to prove, she was one of the co-chairs, I bet you're surprised. But we were able to prove that if you can think outside of the box and be a little creative and make people want to know what you're doing and what you're up to. I mean, we contacted Saida Garrett. She wrote the song Man in the Mirror, and let me tell you, there was not one dry eye when there's a video of baby tigers, you know, in the background, and she's singing that song. So we just tried to figure out ways to really capture people and care about our ecosystem. And now it's much bigger, and it's planets and the planet. But anyway.
You're right. You can give voices to those who don't have a voice.
And when you are given privilege, I think it's everybody's responsibility to help others. And it's someone said purpose. That's it. It's easy. Once you find purpose, you're like, no, I want to save those tigers. You know, she wants this. Okay. Anyway.
I think that I'll think about this. So we run an internal innovation program human-centered design. We've got people that are staffed out around the world, 33 different countries that we operate in. These are the people that work day in, day out in the remotest of places. And we bring them together once a year. We do an ideation day. We come up with ideas for ways we might be able to help our clients in the case of the past couple of years using AI as a technology. And I think that from a philanthropy and kind of an impact in dollars perspective, the idea between unrestricted and restricted funds are kind of important when you do innovation work. So just like a VC, you can't expect outcomes and impact necessarily from those very early stages. What we need to see is early stage funding that is a little bit more less restricted so that we can have a lot of ideas, we can test some of those things out. We need to be able to go out in the field and actually have conversations with our clients. And then we need to be able to get it into their hands and see if it works. And only through then can we figure out if it's got the ability to scale. And that's, frankly, just something that restricts us at different times. We do have some great donors. Cisco is an example, who gives us very unrestricted funding that gives us the ability to do some of that work. And so that's something that I think is really important. Thanks.
I would second that on unrestricted funding. It just makes the work so much easier. I would just say something I really enjoyed partnering with a couple of donors on in this campaign has been a challenge. We 2 years ago had just kind of stalled out. Every big campaign, you get those weeks go by and you just aren't closing any of those 6 or 7 figure gifts. We had a $10 million match that we worked on with a major foundation in town. And it lit a fire. I mean, there is just, as a philanthropist, I think if you can put forward, there's a lot of fake matches out there, right? You're like, every dollar is matched. A lot of those, the money's in the bank. But a real challenge where you have to show that this is new money that has been pledged by this date. We raised $20 million. We raised the 10 and then got the 10. And to close the campaign, we're actually at 96%. So we've got $6 million and change left to raise, and working on a final challenge with a different funder. It's going to hopefully do the same thing, light a fire. So I really love working with donors on things that real challenges that will move the needle.
You're right about the false pledges or matches, or we always say match up to. But we use that as a launch pad, and then we aggressively market it, continuing, because the number is always much higher. There's never enough, right? So we try not to fall into that trap.
Yeah, it's gotta
be very, very transparent with our donors and collaborators. I think the one thing that I would say, or because we're a grant maker, not a grant recipient. Is we do that sort of heavy lifting at the front end just to make sure that we can collaborate. Now we have our definiteness of purpose with CASE, so that even gives us more of a focus on our mission. And when we're trying to figure out what we were doing in the early days, started at 2007, we did a 5-year multi-year $100,000 a year grant, and we will never do that again. It was, hey, look, we got locked into something that we wished we could have got out of, and it would be let's just go back to the annual. It was with all good intent, but wouldn't do that. The upside of, and that's really the only downside I could think of in the early learning curve days, and today is it's a big sigh of relief to be able to wake up and think about the work that we're doing strategically with a global footprint, and actually know what we're doing. Because the world of the not-for-profit world, when I first got into this, I found it, with all due respect, to be quite a boring place. There all kinds of people wanted to start their 501c3, and they never really went to look to see if somebody else was already doing what they wanted to work with, and then join forces with them. They wanted to do their own thing. And today, still at the IRS, the whole 501c3 pipe is clogged. It is really stacked. So that doesn't make your work any easier, and it makes as a grant maker, makes our work easier, actually. Because we know the cream of the crop is kind of where we go, and we do advise and like to integrate with others to say, hey, why don't you do this, right? Because they may have been an interest to us, and if we were on their interview list and we found out, well, hey, so we don't want to just walk away. We want to say, hey, what can we do to help make the world a better place? That's sort of the thing, to contribute. You want to contribute. How can we help you do that, if we can?
Thank you. How is AI affecting philanthropy, both good and bad?
I'm thinking about the recent cuts that have happened. I got a call from Treehouse, and they were, having to let staff go because of the massive cuts that our state was cutting back. And as far as AI is concerned, I mean, I've worked with you also on the waterfront. You'd probably be better to address that because you're on the front lines of it. You want to say?
Our mission at the Woodland Park Zoo is to not have zoos. So there is technology. So if we do our job and protect these ecosystems, we don't need zoos, right? We don't need them. And the technology that's coming out will make it feel like you're actually with a tiger or with a rhino, and they don't have to be there. So our goal is hopefully, I think with any nonprofit, right? If there's no need, you don't need to have it, right? So our goal is to eventually get rid of our zoos.
Let me say one more thing. I think AI's helped the begging letters look a lot better.
And the break.
I've already talked about how we apply AI for our programmatic needs. I think that when we think about how we apply it internally, that's an entirely different world. And it's one that I don't spend a lot of time with our IT department and things like that, and it's something that we need to do. So I think that there's lots of room for organizations. You talked about kind of how NGOs can, things like that can get kind of static in the way that they operate, just like any organization. And so I think there's lots of opportunities to look at technologies like Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, things like that internally for ways to make it better. We're taking baby steps there, but I think that they're just like any other business.
I would agree. I think there are ways to just operate more efficiently, and nonprofits have like really slim margins. So yeah, get more efficient. I always think about grant writing because you can have AI just write a grant for you, but then as a funder it's pretty easy to tell when someone, so I think that's a slippery slope. And then I'm always thinking about just like privacy policy and donor data, and that, even like AI note takers in a meeting where, where we're discussing strategy, and like, this is private information, and I just think the integrity of the fundraising field, we need to be really, really mindful of that.
AI. Somebody said earlier on about I think it was you who said, do we have to say this word again? It's sort of like it's really cool at the front end. No, it was the Scale Fellow, and really jazzed about the underlying technology. But do we have to keep talking about it? What are we going to actually? How are we going to apply it? And as a grant maker, as a foundation, grant makers are not funding technology for not-for-profits, right? They just sort of leave that up to you. They don't get in and ask you, so how are you building and nurturing and developing your donor database using AI? And of course, we encourage and help the organizations we work with do that. Some of them are behind the times. They're just not thinking. That's like 3% of not-for-profits in the U.S. are actually fully engaged in pulling it in. And so that's not good because, the efficiency of scale is there if you embrace it, right? So we like to really talk about that in our when we invite. We're by invitation only, so we got to find out who we want to invite to apply for a grant, and that takes work. And in that process, we develop a relationship, and if we get to a point where we go, this is somebody we want to invite, we make it real easy for them. It's like 4 pages.
Thank
You don't have to write grant. I mean, that's just such a waste of your time, you know, to have to go through all those hoops and rings of fire to do that. So we're working with other foundations as well locally, collaborating with them. Apex is our first one. And we're focused on that particular part of technology as it relates to our grantees. You know, we want to make their jobs easier.
So let me try to put a nice bow on this. 4 days we've been doing this, but I put on the screen, 'cause this relates back to philanthropy and impact. This is our AI, which you can't really see very well from where you're sitting, but it, and this is in beta. We only have like 30, 40 users, but it takes, all I need is a website, or I need your website but it's the same process of scoring. I don't know if Jack is here. Always. So, but what the angel groups do, right? You score. What will you do on deals? Whether you're investing or you're looking at something, you want to compare notes on the foundation, on the programs. Who do I know that's in those programs? Are they mission aligned? Why aren't we doing this for the same thing we do with deals, right? And then it's not that hard. We've always asked, 10 years ago, I probably never told this story. 10 years ago, I left my family office and I didn't call it 361 firm, but I asked everybody to fill out a diagnostic. Crickets. No one was filling out a diagnostic. But then to come to the event, you know, they started to fill out the diagnostics, and I've always had what's your philanthropic interests? And when Ukraine when Russia invaded, we met every day at 7 a.m. for 4 or 5 weeks. We got hospital, we got ambulances. We made that sort of our wartime rally cry, because I lived 8 years in Russia. I was on the board of EY, Kiev many times. I just couldn't, still don't understand why we can even reconcile some things that are happening. But point is, whether it's recidivism, whether it's human trafficking, whatever it is, local's local. It's always, you know, waterfront. It's better for the people from the local. But if it's something that's if it aligns with values, and if someone's got a good program that's working, so give prisoners college credit or certification. Maybe, who was talking about the need for welders, whatever it is? Give them $150,000 job. What I would love to do is I've just sort of had this eureka, is take what we're doing here on deals and bring the same parallel universe, because grantors, there are grant advisors, they're bankers basically in a way, and then there are people with great programs, and we just want to know who your LPs are, who's in it, and yeah, have transparency and scoring, and I mean, I don't want to make it perfectly ROI based, but whatever your criteria is, I think this is for us. If you haven't been around me enough or at all, this is what I think our legacy will be, and that's why we have a panel on these. I call it, I didn't want to raise money, because when you raise money, that's responsibility. Well, actually, we did it in San Francisco for Steve Young and Jerry Rice. And I felt uncomfortable because I didn't really know their program, but what I just want to do is bring everybody together, and by being together, we can bubble up the best philanthropies, bubble up the best programs. Because, like, take Anschult's family office out of Denver, you know, or Gates Foundation. I invited them, but it's a little bit like Jack. I have to invite them 4 times, then he finally comes to the event. But Keith Matthews is general counsel. I went to law school with him at Michigan. But I said to Keith, like, look, I think there's a lot of programs that malaria is their issue, right? Mm-hmm. So we have synthetic bio. It's a molecule. I think somebody invested in Rafiq. Did you talk about synthetic bio? Sorry. Synthetic bio is an. So we do that MIT technology. Where's the bench? Son of a bench. That's MIT technology. That you take a sugar, you engineer this molecule, And instead of having to cut down a tree and ruining the tree, you get the molecule from sugar and an enzyme. And it also, there's so many things that technology could do if you could just align the for-profit to MJ's world and the nonprofit, because then you don't have to do another grant cycle if we could solve it. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you need true philanthropy dollars. But my eureka today is I need to use this for philanthropy. And I think that's, it just came to me. Because AI. We have good news, bad news, and maybe good news.
Good news at the end. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate all that you're doing and for coming to speak. And
Yes, thank you, everyone.
The bad news is, it's got some bad news. The boat is not working, so we're not going on the boat. And the Amazon balls also are not working. So we're going to go to the Rainier Club. And after we have a cocktail here, we'll go to the Rainier Club and then possibly, have dinner up at the Columbia Tower Club following. So mock, regular, tail, whichever. Did you have a question?
But that's actually good news, and the weather's good news.
That's beautiful, right?
Yeah, a quick question to the panel and really to everyone here. We're in the ecosystem of we're all in a fortunate place to be able to have discretionary funds to invest that isn't really going to probably impact our basic standard of living. You all are philanthropists. Your return on investment is social good exclusively. Where does it blend, where there's true impact investing, where that intersection is, where, okay, I'm going to make this investment, maybe straight up investment, it doesn't quite fit my risk profile or my theme or whatever, but I can write it off anyway, even if it doesn't. And I know that by making the investment, it's causing social good. And it seems to be, it seems to have legs. It might go up 10x. Okay, how does that fit into the overall ecosystem as philanthropists and, as family office managers and so on?
I think it's the best thing when that happens. I mean, as I said, in my family, my husband's interested in animal conservation. My son at 31 is interested in housing affordability and higher education. So he invested in a company called Respace that does communal fractionalized ownership and housing. And so he does a ton of education on young millennials getting into their first investment property. And, it's an investment in something he's passionate about is housing. And I mean, being a housing provider my entire life, our happiest day is when someone comes and says, hey, we're going to buy a house. I mean, it's that's our business is renting, but, it's great for them and for their future than to just, be paying them rent. So.
You like, she said pass. I will. I'm not sure how to answer that.
Yeah, with us, we require capital in order to try these solutions out. I already talked about that. We're partnering with people like Microsoft Research, for instance, because we've got what we call first mile and last mile. We are actually touching the clients that we serve. And so when Microsoft Research, for instance, wants to get more information on how low resource language models improvements could help something, we're there. We can actually bring those things to people and get them to try it and give feedback and things like that. So I know I'm a little bit different than other people on the panel here, but that's the way I think about it, is that we actually are partnering with some for-profit businesses in Kenya with Safaricom, largest MNO there. Because they have a division called Digifarm that wants to support farmers. We want to support farmers. So they're leveraging our tech in order to supply extension services. We're not benefiting, we're not profiting from it. They potentially could in the future, but it's a learning experience for both of us. So thanks.
I don't know if I'm answering your question, but philanthropy is personal, and it's like choosing a piece of artwork that you're not buying it as, you might be just buying art to invest, but you might be buying art that you want to spend every day with, right? That brings meaning to your life. And I think ultimately there are so many choices. You can save tigers, you can invest in housing. I mean, like, the need is endless. And I think it's finding something that is close to you. You know, I'm all about place-based. I think how you invest in the place that you live. That said, we live in a very global world where we're all hopping on planes all the time. So maybe a place that is special to you is not on this continent, right? So I think it's finding that thing. And then from my perspective, double down, like, make a transformational gift rather than, you know, just from where I sit, given my nonprofit salary, I do a lot of like monthly giving. That's not transformational. That's important. We need those monthly givers. But think about, you know, it's like, it's that impact is really like that thing that you care so much about, and then investing in a big way. And I can't say enough about unrestricted giving. I think trust-based philanthropy is the future, where you are just, you build a relationship with a nonprofit, you care about that impact, and then you just really, I think, double down, like, rather than spreading it thinly. It makes a huge difference.
Again, back as a foundation and a grant maker, but also this is our first family's generation of wealth. So I'm the investor. I invested into starting the foundation. So there's measured outcome that, you know, stocks, bonds, all that stuff, right? Global diversification. I invest in startups. I have been a startup myself. And failed my way to a point where I could actually put it somewhere, which is back, and I decided that a foundation was the right vehicle to do that. So in kind of answering your question is, well, measured outcomes is probably the best way to answer your question. Is we don't invest in research. So the full circle of whatever we're working with, we invest in activities that we can say, hey, that worked. Let's do more of that. And then you as a donor, we're grant maker donor, we're same thing, right? You know, for an organization that we both may support in different capacities. But those measured outcomes is where you can get your ROI. You can go, hey, that was worth the buck, you know, or I don't see it, right? So, and then what we feel like is we're in that circle that it all gets fed back into that loop of research. Like, everyone's doing some kind of research about something, and we helped it on the outside. And then it gets fed back in, and it makes, again, it all work better. More and better results faster is what we expect.
Well, we want those loops to interloop. If
Yeah.
could, right?
Yeah.
What you've learned is, and what we've learned, and share that. And there's a lot of fakes and frauds and.
Yeah, we don't hover and we don't direct. We just hope that through the interview process that we've picked the right organization to invite to apply for a grant. The only governing factor we have as of really this year is case.
But maybe we want to co-invest. Just like, again, I'm just taking my parallel worlds. Like, you've done that diligence. You have a reason. You probably have a memo for whatever it is. It's internal. Maybe we can learn from that, and
Yeah.
we'll trust your judgment or not.
Foundations tend to have sort of a it's my way or the highway kind of approach,
Right.
and
Not everyone.
We're at least locally here. We're opening that up because we have 3 foundations that are working with us that like case, like with the work we're doing, and therefore we're sharing the wealth in that regard too. Then there are other donors too. So, but foundation side of the equation is a little bit of a hard nut to crack, but you know. Nothing easy is worth doing anyway, so get on it. Get up and get on it.
Yeah.
That's the theme for the night. Let's make that our theme. All right. Well, I think we have some places to go. Hopefully, just follow the ride. We'll start here. Let's just decompress and go and meet the people you've just heard from and need to meet. And
come join our 361 firm community of investors and thought leaders. We have a lot of events created by the community as we collaborate on investments and philanthropic interests. Join us.